Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get started with the special board meeting of the Village of Burr Ridge Board of Trustees. Let's all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. All together now. Thank you. Okay. Please have the roll taken. Here. 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 So welcome to the meeting tonight. Mayor Grasso will be arriving shortly. He's been detained on business, but he will be arriving here shortly. So he asked me to fill in for him in his absence as Mayor Pro Tem to allow us to start the meeting on time. So let's review tonight's agenda. We're going to have a summary from the State of Illinois' Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act from our village attorney. We're going to have a public safety implication of the CRTA from our chief of police and Mr. Berlin, our DuPage County State's attorney. There'll be a staff presentation regarding cannabis business regulations and related local impacts. Then we'll have public comment. With respect to public comment, we ask you to follow some guidelines. We ask that you stay on topic of cannabis businesses in the Village of Burr Ridge. We ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes so everyone will have a chance to speak tonight. If you agree with the previous comments made by a speaker, say, I agree with so-and-so. You don't have to repeat them. So if you agree, we'll take that into account, that all those comments that person has said, you've agreed to. If you have a new comment to add, please feel free to mention it. If you recite a fact, tell us the source of your fact. If you heard it at the 7-Eleven or at the grocery store, it really shouldn't be mentioned. And we would like to give everyone the opportunity a chance to speak once before we will allow those wishing to speak a second time. This is to ensure that everyone is given at least one opportunity to speak. Are there any questions? Okay. Let's proceed with the summary of the State of Illinois Cannabis Regulation Tax Act, please.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Melissa Wolf from our village attorney's office. Melissa will give an overview of the State of Illinois Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. Melissa, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm just giving a cursory overview of the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, which we all know was enacted and is effective January 1 of 2020. The act essentially legalizes the possession and private use of cannabis for Illinois residents over 21 years of age. So as of January 1 of 2020, Illinois residents may possess up to 30 grams of the cannabis flower, 500 milligrams of a THC-infused product, and 5 grams of cannabis concentrate, and these numbers are cumulative. For residents that are out of the state of Illinois, these numbers are divided in half. As part of the decriminalization of cannabis by this act, the act provides for mandatory and discretionary expungement of criminal convictions related to minor and nonviolent cannabis offenses. As a result of the legalization of cannabis, municipalities now may not restrict the possession of cannabis within these legal limits and may not restrict the private consumption of cannabis that is authorized by the act. However, the act does prohibit the public use of cannabis. The Village of Burr Ridge may adopt and enforce local ordinances to regulate possession and public consumption of cannabis so long as those regulations are consistent with the mandates of the act. The act also does touch upon medical cannabis. It allows for home grow cannabis for patients that are over 21 years of age, and the authorization is on a limited basis. So patients are allowed to only up to 5 plants. These plants may not be in ordinary public view. They also may not be sold or distributed, and the adult patient must also be a resident of Illinois for 30 days. In addition, the act maintains the Smoke-Free Illinois Act, and it does apply to smoking cannabis. The act also provides that property owners may prohibit the use of cannabis by any guest leasee, customer, or visitor on their property. The Act also specifies that employer protections are still maintained and that nothing prohibits employers from adopting reasonable zero tolerance or drug-free workplace policies concerning drug testing, smoking, consumption, storage, or use of cannabis in the workplace or while on call. As such, employers may prohibit the use of cannabis by employees in the workplace and may prohibit employees from being under the influence of cannabis while working and may engage in discipline up to termination for violation of employer policies and workplace rules. As with any policy, these employment policies must be applied in a non-discriminatory manner. The Act also allows for local zoning and business regulation of adult use cannabis establishments, and that's mainly why we're here tonight. The Act preserves local zoning authority and directly authorizes municipalities to prohibit or to allow and regulate the location of cannabis businesses within the village. These are some of the issues that the village does have to decide tonight. One, because the village has the authority to create zoning regulations to either prohibit or allow it, the village will have to decide which direction they're going in that regard. The village may outrightly ban or prohibit establishments related to the commercial production or distribution of adult use cannabis. This is called opting out. If the village chooses not to opt out and is inclined to allow for such establishments, the village may enact zoning regulations designating the time, place, manner, and number of establishments, including minimum distance requirements from these establishments and other sensitive uses. The village may also regulate or prohibit on-premise cannabis consumption. If the village authorizes adult use cannabis through their zoning regulations, the village may also impose a tax up to 3% of the purchase price of the cannabis products. Regardless of whether the village does allow for adult use cannabis establishments, the villages also will be a part of a revenue sharing program established by the state and will receive 8% of local government distributive fund monies, which funds are obligated to be used by the village for crime prevention programs, training, and interdiction efforts related to the illegal cannabis market and cannabis-based DUIs. That's a brief overview of the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, and I'm available to answer any questions as we proceed.
Excuse me, I think people back here can't hear and they're asking if there's some way to get a microphone or something so they can hear back here.
A speaker?
Something.
Evan? Not really?
Not really?
There's more room in here if people want to come in and stand or sit.
It's all the way out to the door.
They're gonna do this at the hotel in the ballroom.
Out there?
That's the
Chairs out there?
No, this is the.
No, Evan said no. Thank you for your patience and understanding. We don't have any more chairs here in the village, I'm sorry. Sure, absolutely.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I have a question, yes. So the last part that you mentioned there about the local government distributive funds, are those, so even if we opt out, the village may receive funding, or is that only if we opt in, the village would receive
No,
funding?
you receive funding regardless. Municipalities will receive that funding regardless, but the use of that funding is restricted to those particular uses with respect to crime prevention programs, training, and efforts to eliminate the illegal cannabis markets and, cannabis-based DUIs. So although regardless of whether the village opts out, you will receive those funds. It's just that those funds can only be used for that specific purpose. I apologize.
So the answer is yes.
So the answer is yes, the village may still receive those funds. However, the funds are obligated to be used for a specific purpose related to the crime prevention programs, training, and interdiction efforts related to the illegal cannabis market and cannabis-based DUIs. The tax that would be imposed if a use was allowed and the village opted in or to allow for establishments, that up to 3% tax that could be established by the village does not have a limitation for a specific use.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions from the board? We'll entertain audience questions when we come to the audience time period, okay? Let's get these presentations out of the way so we can get to your comments. Okay, so next up is Chief John Madden to talk about public safety implications with respect to the recreational cannabis act. Chief Madden.
Thank you. Good evening. State's Attorney Bob Berlin and I are going to address public safety, the public safety impact of legalized cannabis in Illinois. Mr. Berlin has a very informative presentation that he's going to present. I will be brief as to not duplicate his presentation and to allow more time for public comment. I, as a member of the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, have opposed legalized cannabis in Illinois. I attended hearings in Springfield with the Illinois Chiefs, while our association president spoke in opposition and testified on the impact of legalization on public safety. In January 2020, legalized cannabis will present significant challenges for law enforcement. The best evidence to support that statement is provided in a 2018 report to the Colorado General Assembly by the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice and the September 2018 Rocky Mountain High Intensive Drug Trafficking Area Report. I, along with my fellow chiefs in Illinois, are very concerned about the impact of the legislation on teenage use, increased crime, increased traffic fatalities, impaired driving enforcement, and the black market, to name a few. Mr. Berlin will go into detail on each of these topics in his presentation. I was also asked to provide crime stats on existing medical cannabis dispensaries in Illinois. The most recent survey was completed by the Village of Lombard, who surveyed 11 area communities. No community indicated that any medical cannabis dispensary requested more than 3 calls for service during the recent 4-year program. I'll turn it over to Mr. Berlin for his presentation.
Thank you, Chief.
Is the clicker?
Good evening, everybody. What I'm going to go through tonight is research that is publicly available, and this it deals mostly with Colorado. There's some statistics from Washington and also California. And let me start by saying that in other states, cannabis was legalized by way of referendum. In Illinois, it was the General Assembly that passed a law. But based on what I've seen in Illinois' law, I believe Illinois' experience will be very similar to these other states. So if we could start, there was a survey that was done in 2017. And this was a national survey on drug use and health in Colorado. And the important date to remember here, there's actually 2 dates to remember in Colorado. The law was passed in November of 2012, legalizing marijuana, and it actually took effect January of 2014. So this survey was conducted in 2017, and 45% of teenagers, there was an increase in use of 45% of teenagers in Colorado. In fact, ages 12 and older, Colorado was ranked third in the nation and 85% higher than the national average. These crime statistics now are 3-year periods, 2009 to 2012 before legalization, and then 2013 to 2016. And remember, the law took effect January of 2014. And what you saw was an increase in property crime. While it had gone up 4.1% in that 3-year period prior to legalization, it went up 8.3% after. Violent crime, a significant increase. It was a 1.2% increase in the 3 years before, and it went up to 18.6% after legalization. And you can see the increase in all crimes. Now, this drills it down a little bit more regarding property crimes, and they consider a robbery a property crime. Robbery actually can also be a violent crime, but robberies were up a 19% increase, theft 8.3%, fraud 43% increase, and a huge increase in motor vehicle theft. And this is 2013 to 2018. Now we look at violent crimes. And you can see the increase in murders, up over 20%, sexual assaults 26%, and aggravated assaults went up 48%. Here come, in my opinion, what are some of the most disturbing numbers, and that is the number of traffic fatalities that increased. And you can see since legalization, the steady increase in traffic fatalities, a 38% increase between 2014, or actually 2013 and 2017. So now this is the state of Washington. This slide applies to. Washington legalized marijuana in 2012. And they had twice as many fatal crash-involved drivers who had THC in their system in 2014 compared to previous years. And that was the American Automobile Association that reported that statistic. Going back to Colorado, this is the number of fatalities with drivers testing positive for marijuana. 55 in 2013, all the way up to 138 in 2017, a 150% increase. Looking at the number of DUIs in Colorado, in 2014, again, you've got the increase in that 3-year period. All DUI drugs, just involving marijuana only, you see the increase. Involving marijuana, you see an increase. Involving marijuana only, you see a decrease. And one of the reasons for that is many cases where people are using marijuana, there are other drugs or alcohol involved. So where it's marijuana only, there was actually a decrease. But all DUI drugs and DUIs involving marijuana, we saw an increase in Colorado. This is California. California legalized marijuana in 2016, and according to the California Highway Patrol, their DUI marijuana arrests increased 31%, and injuries related to people driving under the influence of marijuana increased 102% since recreational cannabis was legalized. So now we look at the most common derivative crimes in states that have legalized marijuana. And the most common are robberies of stores and their customers and burglaries of stores. But what these other states found is that over time, those numbers actually dropped. And they attributed that to dispensaries and stores who are selling marijuana actually have an increase in security. So they'll spend a lot of money insecurity and alarms, and as a result, over time, those crimes actually went down. Looking at violent crime, again, this is in Colorado, filings of felony complaints in many jurisdictions, including Boulder, were up 33%. Now, to be fair, I'm including a comment from Commander James Henning of the Denver Police Department, who said that despite all of these statistics, it was too early to draw conclusions about the correlation between marijuana legalization and the increase in overall crime rate. And the Denver Police Department actually added more police officers to combat the marijuana black market, which I'll talk about in a minute. This was a California Department of Transportation survey. And this survey revealed that 69% of drivers admitted to driving high within the last year. 55% of drivers said they believe that it's actually safe to drive under the influence of marijuana. Very disturbing statistic. Okay, in 2016, 70% of the almost 4,000 drivers charged with DUI alcohol also tested positive for marijuana. So again, that's something that Colorado saw was many people under the influence of both marijuana and alcohol combined. So when we talk about the black market, these are your street drug dealers. And the research has shown that in states that legalize marijuana, it does not put the drug dealers out of business. The drug dealers are business people like everybody else. They're in it for profit. So if the state is going to sell it for a certain amount, including the taxes, the drug dealers will sell it for less. And obviously, consumers are always going to look for the best deal. So the black market actually continues to thrive in legalized states. And actually, Colorado, according to Rocky Mountain HIDA, their highway seizures of marijuana increased 43% in a 4-year period after legalization. And part of that is due to the fact that where it's legal, the drug dealers are going to transport the legal marijuana out of state to sell it in those states where it's still not legal. So I talked about how seizures went up, not just highway seizures, but actually seizures of U.S. mail increased 844% during that same 4-year period. Robert Troyer is the U.S. Attorney for the District of Colorado, and this was a comment he made really in reference to what I talked about with the burglaries and robberies. But what he said is that while burglaries of licensed facilities have fallen due to higher security, robberies, burglaries, aggravated assaults, and homicides remain high in the black market for marijuana. And prosecutors and police officers agree that Colorado's black market will exist as long as marijuana remains illegal in other states. And, you know, I know it's, Michigan has just legalized it, but I don't believe they've actually started selling it, but I don't believe it's legal in Indiana or Iowa, in the states neighboring Illinois. So moving on to home grow operations. Again, Illinois' law will allow home grow of 5 plants for medical cannabis users, but when it's legalized actually in the state of Washington, the prosecuting attorney, Dan Satterberg, noted that many of the illegal grow houses were reportedly controlled by foreign nationals who purchase homes and actually staff them with employees to cultivate these plants. And that, according to Mr. Satterberg, some of the individuals tending to the plants may be human trafficking victims, forced or coerced into working in the illegal grow homes. Again, the Kings County prosecuting attorney and Seattle city attorney had threatened to take civil action against unlicensed stores purporting to be legitimate medical marijuana dispensaries. We're actually successful in shutting a number of them down. So Chief Madden talked a little bit about the challenges for law enforcement. What everyone has to remember is, unlike a breathalyzer for alcohol, there is no roadside test for marijuana. There's actually a pilot program that's taking place right now in Carroll Stream where they're using an oral swab, and they swab the inside of a driver's cheek, and they can get a reading, but they don't have the technology right now to quantify what that reading is, whether it's going to be over that 5 nanogram standard for a presumption of DUI in Illinois. And also, this oral swab technology has never been tested in an Illinois courtroom. So if we get to that point where it's reliable, we're going to have what's called a Fry hearing, where a judge will have to determine its reliability before it's admissible. So without a roadside test, we're left with blood or urine of a driver. Unless they consent, that requires a search warrant. And while we have recently instituted electronic search warrants in Illinois, actually DuPage County developed the technology where we're able to communicate via Skype with our judges so the police don't have to wake them up in the middle of the night at their home. The reality is marijuana dissipates very quickly through the body, most of the time within 2 hours. So that requires drafting and getting a search warrant signed, and then either getting the person to a hospital or getting a phlebotomist out to the police station to get the blood drawn within 2 hours. It's going to make it extremely difficult to get a chemical test in these cases. So that means we are going to rely heavily on observations of police officers. There are what's known as drug recognition experts in law enforcement, and they receive specialized training in being able to detect use of drugs by drivers. But there's only 159 of these drug recognition experts in the state of Illinois. I know Carroll Stream, I believe, has the most in DuPage County, and they have 6. The field sobriety tests that most people are familiar with, the one-leg stand, the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, the walk-and-turn test, those are designed for alcohol and not for drugs and marijuana. Police officers can still use them, and they give officers certain clues, but to run a driver through the full gamut of a drug recognition expert analysis is about 45 minutes that it takes, and that's time that an officer is unavailable to answer other calls. So these cases are going to be very difficult for us as prosecutors to prosecute in court.
Can I interrupt you for
Sure.
1 second?
Yes.
Thank you for coming tonight, by the way. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I was late tonight. I did have a prior commitment, and I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Guy Francis for sitting in. I want to try something because I just walked through a lot of people that are outside that cannot hear. I'm going to ask the front row, each front row, to get up and move your chairs, only the front row right now, as far as you possibly can come up here. We're all a cozy little village here. Yeah, okay, that's pretty close. Wait.
Well, how are you?
Right. So try to make it as even as possible because I'm going to ask the next row to come up. What I'm trying to do is create room in the back for people to be able to come in and stand. This is in the form of a town hall meeting. This is how democracy started in this country, by having people together and expressing their opinions. So thank you all for coming out tonight. And if I had known, or if the board had known, I'm sure if the board had known that this many people would show up, we would have tried to find a bigger spot. But it does show, in fact, the interest that this community has in a very important subject. That said, I want to thank State's Attorney Berlin, who's coming here. Remember that the board, someone raised the point that why is the board considering this? The board is doing its job. The board needs to understand the issues, as it does with everything. And I've spoken to almost every board member in the last week on this subject because they are that concerned. So the board is doing its job by hearing the issues before taking the vote, and in fact asking for a special meeting for this purpose. That is what responsible boards do in villages. Now, I'm going to of course, let the state's attorney finish and any other, I'm sorry, John, did I already miss your remarks? Okay, and a couple of questions. But it's my intent, because I know the tenor of this village. I've been part of this community a long time, and this isn't my first rodeo as mayor. So I'm going to allow the state's attorney to finish. And I have received many emails in the last 3 weeks, 2 months, and forward those, almost all of them, to, I believe, the staff who's given them to the board. And I think I know where this issue is going, and I am likely, because of the number of people here tonight, to call for an early vote. So let's let State's Attorney Berlin, who spends a lot of time out of his home at night serving the people of DuPage County. There are 32 villages considering this in DuPage County. Bob Berlin is being asked to be at all of their villages at the same time. He is here as a special favor to Chief Madden and me and this board. And so thank you for listening to him. And Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt, but please continue now. And then I will take the floor again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, getting back to challenges of law enforcement. I talked about the accuracy of the oral swab, but the 5 or 10 nanogram standard that's in the statute. So we're talking about 5 nanograms of blood or 10 nanograms of other bodily substance, bodily fluid. That is a debatable standard. And I was part of the back and forth in Springfield when this legislation was being drafted. But there's a lot of research on both sides to say, well, people can be under the influence with less than 5 or 10 nanograms, and some who say, well, it takes more. So it's an evolving science is what it is. And the other thing to remember is the connection between THC. THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. The connection between the THC levels in someone's blood or saliva in brain has not been accurately established, like it is for alcohol. For alcohol, we know that standard of 0.08, and we know that how that 0.08 affects the overwhelming majority of the motoring public. Much different with marijuana. So the last slide is a marijuana breathalyzer. And actually, there was an article, after I put this presentation together, there was just an article in the Tribune last week talking about this Hound Labs breathalyzer in California. This is a company that's actually it's an emergency room physician who created this. He was also a part-time law enforcement officer. And his company is going to be rolling out a breath test that several law enforcement agencies in California are going to be using by the end of this year. And the research, again, I talked about how marijuana dissipates through the body very quickly, but the research shows that THC actually peaks at about 15 minutes after use, and then is out of someone's breath within 2 to 3 hours. Much different than alcohol. And again, another point to remember is we don't know, this has never been tested in court. We don't know how effective it is and the difference between smoking marijuana or ingesting it by way of edibles, because that's also part of this new law coming January 1st, 2020. Are, you know, the cookies and the brownies and other edibles that these dispensaries will be able to sell. So the bottom line is this. I can tell you from my own experience being a prosecutor for 32 years now, DUI cases are always difficult for the state. Even with a breathalyzer, defense attorneys, especially the good ones, many of whom are former prosecutors, you know, they have all kinds of ways of attacking police officers on the stand, as well as the breath test. I think we do a very good job of prosecuting them, but marijuana is going to create a whole new level of challenges when it comes to prosecution, because the state of the scientific research and the state of science actually hasn't caught up with where we are right now without that roadside test.
May I ask you a question, sir? Do you know after the 2 to 3 hours that it's out of the breath if the person would still be, for all accounts and purposes, high and dangerous to drive?
You know, I'm not a physician, so
We
it's hard
have
for me.
physicians in the room.
Hard for me to say, but I believe just because the breath can't measure it doesn't mean that someone is not going to still be experiencing the effects.
Right, 'cause I
It's just
think
like
that's
alcohol.
important.
Just like alcohol, you can be experiencing the effects for hours later.
Right, right. Thank you.
So that concludes the presentation.
Okay. And again, on behalf of the residents of Burr Ridge, thank you, Bob, for coming here and giving us your knowledge and experience. You got any final words on this? No, sir. Okay. Now, here's what I intend to do. I am going to let 3 people speak against, and 3 people, if they wish, speak for, and then any comments from the board, and then I am going to call for a vote.
Mr. Mayor,
Rich? Yes.
will you also maybe perhaps ask for a show of hands in the room, who's for and who's against?
Yeah, I kind of think that, but that's not the worst idea in the world. As long, look, this is America. People have different ideas. The fact that someone may disagree with you is why we all live in this country. So respect is important for everyone's views. And you have to understand that this board has not only a law enforcement concern, which is the primary purpose of government, but it also has a fiscal responsibility to all of you. And this act was passed, allegedly, because of fiscal problems in the state of Illinois. Think about this, people. Your representative, Jim Durkin, and your state senator, John Curran, did not vote for this. Think about a state that's reached an era in its fiscal incompetence that its legislature, not its citizens, its legislature voted to run the state government principally on things like raising taxes and legalizing marijuana. Think about the foundations of what you've been given out of Springfield. Now, that's my little stump speech for tonight, because I think that is the root problem with government in this state. It's now going down roads that no one would see government going down, but in fact it is. So thank you for coming out here and speaking on this topic. Rich Morton, I know where you stand, so Rich has been at many of our board meetings. He's been active in many things, so I'm going to ask Rich to speak first on your position on this. And will you identify yourself because this is being recorded?
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Richard Morton. I live at Lake Ridge Club in Burr Ridge since 1989. I am opposed to the village opting in, and I want them to opt out. And there are several reasons for that. Not the least of which is that just checking today on Trulia, there are 369 homes for sale in Burr Ridge. That is roughly double the normal number of homes you'll find for sale in Burr Ridge. And I would say any steps taken by the village board that could imperil future sales of homes in Burr Ridge should be well considered by the trustees. I can guarantee you that young families that are looking to Burr Ridge, which we like to call ourselves a special place, will consider whether Burr Ridge sells marijuana either near them or remote, and it will make a difference. And they will choose not to move to Burr Ridge, and we will lose people that we could very well benefit from. Choosing locations for dispensaries, in my mind, to choose one side, north side versus the south side, is disingenuous. And that to determine that one part of Burr Ridge is not as good as another part of Burr Ridge, I believe would be the wrong step forward. We want to elevate all parts of Burr Ridge, and so I don't think the alternative location idea carries weight. And I agree with you. Illinois is desperate for money, and that's why the legislature, driven by Chicago and Cook County politics, ignoring the rest of the state, legalized marijuana in Illinois. And make no mistake, it's 100% about money. Thank you very much.
Who would like to speak in favor? Sure. Please just identify yourself.
George Dacre. Thank you for coming out tonight. It really shows the support of what this community is about. We have to keep it a special place. Please note in the Tribune on Friday, Chicago legalized cannabis, except for the Gold Coast, the Mag Mile, the Loop, the South Loop, the West Loop, and North River. So you picture a map if you're from Chicago, from North Avenue south to Roosevelt Road, from the lake to the river. No go. Think about that, please. Thank you.
Well, thank you. There is a question, yes. Well, let's, do you want to speak for? Do you want to speak now against? Okay. Pass the microphone, please, and identify yourself.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Hassan Ali. I'm serving as the Imam and Director of Mecca Center on the corner of 91st Street and Route 83. We had the honor to have you many times to support the community. That's good? Okay. Yeah. I'm here tonight, and I see many of our leaders in our community, and I guess as part of my work to work also with other leaders from other faiths, from an interfaith point of view. You know, this corner, the 91st and Route 83, we have 4 or 5 places of worship. We have the Mecca Center. We moved in January 2017, and our community members, who most of them are citizens and residents of Burr Ridge and Willowbrook, invested millions of dollars to have this beautiful place here, not only as a place of worship, but as a community center to serve the entire community. Across street from us, or next door from us, is a church, and then next to it is a Buddha temple. Next to it is a Bohra mosque. We have an interfaith corner over there. And I'm telling you, since we moved, we had many young families who moved to Burr Ridge, not because they love to pay more taxes for their houses, but because they believe that it is a safe and nice place to raise their kids. And I can say that this will never happen if we allow this kind of business to be in our backyard, and that many of them might even think seriously to move to some other places. Thank you.
Is there someone else that would like to speak in favor?
Phil Fox, 7720 Forest Hill Road. I've been a resident of Burr Ridge for 39 years. Based upon the information that Chief Madden and this gentleman mentioned, we all ought to go home and pack and get out of Illinois. Because it's not going to be safe driving on our highways. There's going to be burglaries. There's going to be murders. There's going to be a lot of things, right? And it doesn't matter where we're going to buy this product. We have the Obama Highway just to our north. We have County Line. We got Route 83. We got Wolf Road. We got 91st, 83rd, 79th Street. There's a lot of traffic that goes through our community. Okay? So it doesn't matter where it's going to be dispensed because it's going to be in our neighborhoods. Okay? Based upon Colorado, the DARE program has failed. We can all agree with that. Teenage use is up. So our DARE program has failed. Teenagers with opioid issues did not listen to the DARE program. We've spent millions, maybe billions of dollars educating our youth. Don't do drugs, but they did anyhow. Maybe it's the parents' fault. I have no idea. The housing market, sure. But I think we can blame Springfield for the companies exiting, the jobs exiting, and the citizens exiting the state of Illinois. I just came back from a 2-week vacation in Texas. They are booming. They are booming, and Illinois is at the bottom of the heap, heavily in debt. Our pension program for the police officers is not funded, and it won't be funded. It'll never be funded. The black market. Obviously, our law enforcement has not fixed that problem. On the black market, these drugs are not monitored. There's no way to figure out the quality of it. With a dispensary, we know the quality is going to be there. It's not going to be tainted with other type of narcotics. That's going to kill our youth. Recently, vaping. Vaping's a big problem now because, 100 people's been sick or killed. Okay? That's not even a spit with the drug issue that we're faced with. That's all I have to say. I want you to think about this. Okay? Illinois is in big trouble.
You have a question? Okay. Against or against? You sure? Okay, against. Just joking.
My name is Rabinder Malhotra, and I'm resident of Burridge for more than 23 years. And the issue here is that whether Burridge should opt in or opt out. And I'm saying that we should opt out. The reason here is not whether marijuana is good or bad. It's not the reason whether it's a mile from here or 5 miles from here, because that's all done. Whether we want it or not, there will be a shop with a 5-mile distance or 10-mile distance. So that's not the issue. The issue here is what is our values? Like this gentleman said, what are we all about? Burridge, whatever you're all about. And I'm going to spend a minute, if I can open this. Yes. Okay, there you go. So this is the vision statement from the documents that Village produces. So it says, Burridge is a high-quality suburban community with low-density neighborhood characterized by distinct homes in natural settings. The village accommodates residents who seek a sense of privacy in a tranquil environment. And we desire to enhance the village physical beauty, keeping Burridge a very special place. Now tell me, in Burridge, when we talk about Burridge, who we consider our peers? Hinsdale, Oak Brook, Clarendon Hills, they have, again, the information that you distributed, they have all opted out, or they are leaning to opt out. Even LaGrange is opting out. Naperville is opting out. So where are we going? So there's nothing here. Back burner? Yeah, right. So the question here is, what is the issue here? One issue which I see is revenue. Now I have seen different numbers floating around, and there's some reference that our finance department will produce an estimate which I have not seen. But the number which are floating, first of all, there are going to be 200 some outlets in the whole state. Okay? And they project a revenue anywhere from, at its peak, which is 2025 or 24, the best revenue projections are 400,000 a year for our village. The worst projections are like 42,000, 45,000, all right? So now the question is, this village, who has a surplus of $33 million, do we care about the small issue about if you get $40,000, if you get $100,000? No. And the other point that this gentleman made, that if the perception goes negative, we are all doomed. Not only that our house values are going to go down, but the village, all these shops, people are not going to come here. They are not going to come here because the perception is bad. So consider about it before you vote. And you gentlemen, when you came to us for your vote, I remember this gentleman, I remember this gentleman, and they said this is our vision. So I hope you all take that vision. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else for it? Okay.
Hello, my name is Spencer Houtman. I was born in Burridge.
Spencer, just keep the microphone. I'm sorry about the quality of it.
Better here? What's that?
Oh, we need the mic.
Okay. I was born in Burridge, 437 Kirkwood Cove. I went to Gower West, Gower Middle, Hinsdale South. My partners and I were kind of the guys that started up coming to Burridge and showing interest in opening a dispensary. And I know that's why we're all here today. What's that?
You don't live here now.
I currently do not. No, sir.
Let's just let him speak, please.
No matter what happens today, we had a feeling this would be the outcome. But we wanted to show up because we started this and we felt that it was the proper thing to do. And we just want the village to know that if that ever was allowed.
Well,
I was one of the people that came to the town asking to open a dispensary.
it's
That's
a
why.
public meeting. Normally, we wait, but it is a public meeting, Doctor. Yes.
Okay.
Let's just let him speak, please.
No matter what the village wants, we are here. We want to respect the village and the town in the process. And that's really all I have to say. It's obvious what the village wants. But I felt that because we're here and because we started talking with the village, that the least thing we could do is show up and let it be known that we're here for you guys. And I understand.
I have a question.
Oh, okay.
So what is the logic behind, how is it going to benefit the town in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's mostly about revenue for this town.
Are you interested in Burridge town's revenue and that's why you want to open the dispensary?
No, it's pure economics. We're doing that to make money, obviously, yes.
Okay. So that's the answer for Burridge residents.
Regardless, thank you very much.
All right, so I think we've had 3 for, kind of 3 for and 3 against. I know there's some people out here for questions, or you just want to make statements? Okay, okay. So let's do this first. Let me ask first. Wait. Ladies and gentlemen, as the mayor, I'm asking for order. Now, here's the next thing I'm going to ask. By a show of hands, who's for opting in? Who is for opting in? Opting in. Okay.
How many of them are Burbridge residents?
Oh. Okay. Who is for opting out? I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Okay. Now, we have a very conscientious board here. I would like to call for a vote. And so I'm going to call on Trustee Guy Francis to make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to, excuse me a second here, I had it written down. Make a motion to direct the Plan Commission to hold a public hearing to consider text amendments to the zoning ordinance to prohibit cannabis businesses in the village of Burbridge.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion amongst the trustees? Yes, Al?
Since it started, I spent quite a bit of time on it, and recent issue of the AARP magazine, and some of you people might have seen it, they spent a good 7 pages itemizing the marijuana problem in the country, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Marijuana is, the sad part about it, marijuana is illegal by the federal government. They just don't enforce it. I mean, none of this would be a problem if the federal government did what's on the books. And on January 1st, like has been said, Illinois will become the 11th state that allows recreational and medical marijuana. It will be legal throughout the state. Our Illinois politicians, Pritzker, Madden, and etc., pushed it through. Most of the other states had a vote. We didn't.
What a surprise.
So, and the sad part about it, you have the problem here of opting in and opting out. The sad part about it, what happens is there will be an expense. It's a negative factor. It's been proven. Everyone that I've known for a long time, our police chief and the others are against it. And I can see why. It's more problems and it will be a cost. So the sad part about it, I understand how the people feel. And the sad part about it, at some point, if it gets as bad as projected, it's going to cost a lot of revenue to keep Burridge. So I just want the people to understand that, and especially since it will be so easy to be picked up at other states. One of the comments I'm going to recommend is our village administrator talk to some of these other municipalities, because over half of them are opting out. Now, if we can get a majority of them more, or not a majority, but more of the villages to opt out, maybe it could send something to our politicians about being able to do something about it. So, I hope that can happen. That's just a comment I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you, Al. Anybody else on the board? Tony?
So, echoing Chief Madden's comments that the Illinois Association's Chiefs of Police opposed it, I did speak with our state senator, well, some of our state senator, John Kern, today. They vehemently opposed legalizing cannabis. So there were 23 states that went to referendum to pass cannabis. Only 9 states approved cannabis. 2 states didn't bother going to referendum, Vermont and our lovely state, Illinois. I know, as Al said, it is illegal under our federal government. I don't believe that a dispensary should be placed just in one area of Burridge. If this would be good for Burridge, it would be good anywhere in the village. Because we want to put it in one section, tells me this must not be good for Burridge. And last night, I went to a show downtown with my dad, my brother, and my 14-year-old son, where we enjoyed 3 generations. We went to a show, went to dinner. It was a wonderful night, but it was concluded with us going to our garage and smelling marijuana. My 14-year-old asked me, "What does that smell?" I said, "Marcello, that's marijuana." I said, "Why would anyone want to smell that?" I said, I don't know. So I am very much opposed to it. I mean, they're looking to sell not only marijuana, the leaves, but it would be in brownies, gummy bears, cookies, candy bars, popsicles. These are all items that can be mistakenly substituted for a child's treat somewhere. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other trustees? Yes, Anita? Ladies first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see trustee Mel.
I don't think cannabis dispensaries have any place in Burr Ridge. I think of this village as my family, just like I think of this village as my family, just like I would not ask my kids to go sell pot on the streets because it's a good source of revenue. Similarly, I don't think the village should be selling cannabis because it's a good source of revenue. The medical and long-term ramifications are very negative. Once again, I would like Burr Ridge to be a pit stop for travelers on I-55 and Route 83, not a pot stop.
Yes, thank you. I also agree that this is not the right image for Burr Ridge. You know, we've heard from the residents. We know what Burr Ridge is. I don't think this is the right fit for our village. My vote will reflect that. And Mr. Mayor, I agree with you on your comments about the problems of Springfield. I think you left one problem off, that would be public corruption. And one poor solution that they've come up with, besides drugs and tax hikes, they also are resorting to gambling. So I think all of these are poor solutions in Illinois. So thank you.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Chief Loftus, I had a 11-page PowerPoint presentation I'm not going to bore you with. I'm just going to go to the pages 9 and 10, the conclusions of my presentation, and I'll read them out loud in case you can't see it. So the conclusions are, people go to a liquor store to buy wine for a dinner party, beer for a football game, tailgate event, or a backyard barbecue, and other social drinking activities. People buy weed at a dispensary to get high. We don't have a liquor store in town. Why would we want a cannabis dispensary? We don't have video gambling, a tattoo body piercing parlor, red light cameras, vaping shops, pawn shops, hookah smoke shops, Zelda's tarot card reading and bait shop, and other similar tax revenue generating uses. Why? Because the residents don't want it. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. You heard our safety experts tell us why there is no test for OWI for cannabis consumption. Yes, there are people on our roads today driving their vehicles in our village while they are high. There will be more after January 1st. There will be even more if we allow cannabis dispensaries in our village. This next point goes back to some tax generating information that I won't bore you with, but 0.6% increase in revenues to the village does not offset the increased demand on our police force, the increase in traffic, and the image it creates for our village. We as a village are not desperate for tax revenues like some other villages. Yes, we always have tough budget decisions to make during the annual budgeting process, but we are not desperate for tax dollars, so I vote that we opt out. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that's all the comments from the board. Can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Scalvo?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal? Yes. Trustee Model?
Yes.
6-0, the motion passes. So you understand the process. It's important that this become part of our zoning law. So what the motion was to direct the Plan Commission to consider a text amendment at the Plan Commission to prohibit recreational cannabis as a business anywhere in the village.
Yes.
So the next process is the Plan Commission will consider that. I suspect we know how that vote will come out also. I think we're pretty certain. then it would come back to the board to approve that text amendment. So we're on the road, it's not complete yet, so in case you hear, oh, it's going to the Plan Commission, that's because that's what the process has to be in order to get it part of our zoning law. And then after it gets to the Plan Commission, it comes back to the board for another final vote. But I think you can hear 6-0. This has always been my goal as mayor when I was before and now, to get consensus. That's why this board listened to all of you and just didn't take a snap vote. But as a result of the input of the community, the literature that the staff put together for all of the board members, and what happened tonight, you got a 6-0 vote. That is how government works. Yeah, so that, thank you, Vicki, and I'll defer to Doug. When would this go to the Plan Commission? Evan?
Yes, folks, can you all hear me? So I'm Evan Walter. I'm the Assistant Village Administrator here in the
Wait,
village.
Evan, just bring it away.
Sorry.
Use it.
I'm going to go like this. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Hooray. Okay, so as I said, I'm Evan Walter. I'm the Assistant Village Administrator here. I'll be the planner of this process. The village will hear this at the Plan Commission on November 18th, Monday, November 18th. Now again, as Mayor Grasso has said, the text amendment will reflect one's direction to completely opt out of any cannabis businesses in town. The Plan Commission will hear that exact recommendation from the board. If you have any questions about the planning process, please find my email on the website. We've set up a cannabis page on our website. Please go there, send me an email. I'd be happy to dialogue with you about it. If you have any other questions about the process ahead, I wanted to make sure everyone is informed on the board's behalf as well as your own behalf. And again, November 18th will be the day that the Planning Commission considers this. I'll make a recommendation at that point to the board. The board will at that point hear this November 25th. The regs have to prepare ordinances thereafter.
Do we come back on November 18th?
No, it's on November 18th, Plan Commission. 7 days later, November 25th at the board. By the way, it's just before Thanksgiving, so we'll have a very nice Thanksgiving, I think. So with that, I want to thank everybody again for coming tonight. I'm kind of glad we didn't realize that we needed a bigger room, but I'm kind of glad you all came out anyhow and showed what this village is about. And while people have said it's a special place, by the way, the motto is, it's a very special place. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.